Okay, I think we are ready to go. Good morning again. Thank you very much for joining today's session. And we would like to start today with a short introduction from Christoph Beckbari from the Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Christoph?
Thank you very much, Laura. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to address you today. My name is Christoph Wegvári from the Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I am responsible for the bilateral cooperation between Hungary and China. First of all, I would like to thank for all the support for our partners, the EU SME Centre and also the China IP SME Helpdesk. Thanks for our experts to be here with us today and giving us an insight of the e-commerce in China, how the e-commerce is working. I am glad that I see that there is quite a big number of participants. I see more than 50 participants right now join the webinar. First of all, let me just give you a brief introduction for the Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Well, the Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the HCCI, is an umbrella organization. We, the HCCI, are the headquarters operating in the capital city of Hungary in Budapest. We are an umbrella organization coordinating the work of the 23 regional chamber offices in Hungary. In Hungary, for the legally working companies, they have a compulsory registration system. So through our regional chamber offices, we can reach something like 600,000 companies. In order to facilitate the bilateral cooperation between Hungary and countries, regions that our member companies would like to cooperate with, we have established a so-called bilateral cooperation committee system. In these committees, bilateral committees, we have member companies, Hungarian companies mostly, who would like to cooperate with that certain region, or they already have some business cooperation there. And for example, my responsibility is the Hungarian Chinese Committee. Consists of currently 128 member companies, not just cooperating with the Hungarian SMEs, but also cooperating with the biggest investors, Chinese investors who are present in Hungary, for example, like Wanhua, Huawei, Bank of China. We have members from the different fields, basically all fields that are working within the framework of Chamber and Commerce and Industry. For example, like pharmaceutical industry, water, wastewater management, IT, and so on and so on. As for the e-commerce, in the recent years, it became a very developed area in China, and also it opens up many great business opportunities to cooperate with China. Through the e-commerce, using the tools of e-commerce, you can just easily overcome certain problems when you would like to establish trade with China, for example, like the distance, just to measure it. Also, the recent pandemic situation, in my opinion, just gave a boost to this e-commerce. So I think today is a great opportunity for everyone that through our experts, through the experts of the SME Centre and the IPR Helpdesk, to know more about how this e-commerce system works, what tools you can use, and so on and so on. With the EU SME Centre and the China IPR Helpdesk, we have a long and fruitful cooperation. I wouldn't be able to tell you how long we've been working together. And again, I would like to thank you for this great support. And hopefully in the near future, we will be able to organize more events like that. I would like to urge everyone to follow the websites of the two organizations, visit their websites regularly, sign up for their newsletter, check the publications they have. They are doing a great job, and they can really make your cooperation with China easier for you and fruitful. Thank you very much. I would like to close my welcome speech right now, and I would like to give back the floor to Laura.
Thank you very much, Christoph. We want to thank also today the Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and Industry for this opportunity, and also the China IP SME Helpdesk together with the experts for being available today for this cooperation. Before we start this webinar today, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce the EU SME Centre for those who don't know about us. I believe that most of you are already aware of this project, but just for some that might not be aware of. A second. The EU SME Centre is a European Union strategy that appears in 2010. With the main goal of helping EU SMEs entering the Chinese market. Back then, the European Commission realized that 8 out of 10 companies that tried to enter the Chinese market were failing within the first 3 years of operations. These figures were terribly high, and for that reason, the EU SME Centre was created in order to provide a range of information and increase the level of readiness of the companies towards the market. The EU SME Centre is an initiative that is implemented by 4 different chambers of commerce. You can find them at the bottom of the page, and a business council. The Italian Chamber of Commerce in China is the implementing partner, and EUROCHAMBRES is the umbrella organization which is supporting the actions in Europe, including this webinar today. We have an office in Beijing, nearby the embassies, and we have a wide network of partners around Europe and in China in order to support, let's say, the skills setup, the skill sets and the workshops we are organizing. Very briefly, the services we offer can be divided in 4 different types. The first one is the Knowledge Center. I usually call it an online library. You can log in into our website and find different market reports, almost 200. Some of them are really sector focused, for instance, food and beverage, environment and green tech, manufacturing, and some others are more transversal, like, for example, e-commerce, which is the topic we are covering today, digital marketing, or some HR related topics. Here you can find some of the market reports that are related to the topic today. I have included one also that is different, which is a guide to trade fairs, which is also very important for companies trying to access the market. All of the reports and all the information that you can find online is for free and accessible for all companies or business associations from Europe or the European Union and participating countries. I would like to introduce you today one of the latest tools we have implemented. It's a self-diagnosis tool. It allows companies to understand the real level of readiness towards the market. It only takes 10 minutes to complete the quiz. And most importantly, it will tell you where companies need to be better prepared in order to be successful in the Chinese market. I invite all the companies to try it because it's a very up-to-date tool, very well organized, and I have personally tried, and I believe that the outcome of the input that can provide to companies is especially interesting. The second service we offer is confidential and one-to-one consultation. You can find this on our website under the name as the expert. This is how the interface looks. You only have to choose the expert area of your inquiry and submit your inquiry so that it will go to different experts in different sectors or areas of expertise, such as advocacy, legal, e-commerce, business development, etc. Normally, it takes us 2 to 3 working days to reply to your questions, and all of these services are also for free. Due to the fact that we have been in the business for 10 years, 11 actually, we have been able to develop a very comprehensive section of FAQs where actually companies can find their questions already answered or even find questions that they haven't thought about. So we usually encourage companies to go through this section because they might find additional information that they were not planning on asking about, but could be very useful for their China market entry strategy. The third service is the training center. Not much I can share today as this training we are organizing right now is one of the example. We work in Europe with business support organizations, chambers of commerce, clusters, government offices to organize trainings that help companies to plug the knowledge and skill gap of SMEs entering China. We tailor-make trainings based on the needs of the companies our partners represent, but these trainings are open for all European companies and business support organizations. If you are interested, you can contact me and we can shape a different training for a different topic for your audience. And last but not least, we have also an advocacy platform. Here we try to give voice to the European companies, their concerns and their interest towards the Chinese market. We coordinate with both European authorities and Chinese authorities to try to make them aware of the concerns of the companies, trying to get a better level playing field in China, or some more openness in case of specific sectors in China. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you, Philip. Philip is a long-term expert of the EU SME Centre. He has been collaborating with us since 2015. He's the co-founder of Emerald Green Consulting, a consulting company that helps companies enter the Chinese market. You have also his contact details here in case you want to get more information about him. And Matthias, I will introduce you later afterwards when Philip has finished his presentation. We are going to have a 5 minutes break in between the presentations, or more within Philip's presentation, just to have a brief coffee or just to stretch the legs, but Philip will let you know about this. And before Philip starts, just one quick technical detail. We have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, at Philip's presentation, and then after Matthias. During the event, we encourage you to submit all your questions through the Q&A session. Please do not use the chat for questions, because it will be very difficult for Philip to follow up with all of them, because in the chat people usually write different things. So please use the Q&A as much as you want. And Philip, I leave the floor to you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Christoph, and good morning. It's my pleasure to join you this morning from Dublin in Ireland, and thank you very much to the Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and the EU SME for setting this meeting up today. A little bit about my background is that I'm the co-owner of Emerald Green Consulting. And it's not a traditional consulting company. What it's really born out of is firsthand experience of trading in China. So my background is in food retail, but I have expertise in fintech, e-commerce, logistics, and selling and trading in the Chinese market. And what we're going to talk about this morning is my firsthand experience of trading into China. And it all started back in 2012 when I went on a trade mission to China. And at that stage, my business horizon had been quite small. It had been looking at trading in Ireland, exporting to the UK, exporting to mainland Europe. But after my trip to China in 2012, my eyes were opened to a completely new business horizon, and where I believe the economy and the world economy is going to grow over the next 20 years. And the focus is going to be China, and the focus is going to be Asia. So in 2013, I set up an operation, an online operation based out of Dublin, but exporting to China. And then as we developed, we moved our operations in 2016, our logistics and our warehouse operations to the free trade zone in Shanghai. But the important thing, as we discussed this morning, will be boots on the ground. Well, myself and my business partner didn't want to go and just get an agent. We wanted to see exactly how things were, and we wanted to go there and actually do it and find out ourselves. So from 2013 until late 2019, one of us was in China every 8 to 10 weeks. And I would think that if you are looking to go to China, you really maybe not go as much as 8 to 10 weeks, but you really need to go and understand the market, because the market is so fundamentally different to what you and I are used to in Europe. And across the board, we're working with brands, we're working with state agencies, we work with companies and state agencies in Europe, Middle East, and in Canada at the moment. So very quickly, we're going to look at these three modules this morning. So the first module will what makes China different from Europe, then a little bit of the facts and figures about cross-border e-commerce. We'll take a quick 5-minute break then come on to the difference between websites and platforms. Module 4 is a bit of a case study and some pitfalls that both we and other brands made when we were going into China. And I think you'll find this very interesting, of kind of the do's and don'ts of what you should look out for when you go to China. And then we'll have a questions and answer session in the following up on that. So what makes China e-commerce so different to what we are used to? The first thing is scale, and the second thing is innovation. So I want you we're going to show this slide a few times during the presentation, and it is absolutely outstanding. If you look at 2021, what they're estimating is that the percentage of online sales for all of retail is going to reach 52%. So over half of all retail sales will be online in 2021. That's the estimate. And the 2022 was 44.8. And you can go back 19, 34.1, and actually 2018 was 29.8. So the trajectory has been going up. It's been phenomenal scale of growth. And this is what you really need to kind of focus on, is that the market is fundamentally different. Not only is it absolutely huge, but it's been driven by online. And on the online, I think it's 92% of all online purchases are done on a mobile phone. So it's not done off a tablet, it's not done off a desktop, it's done on the go. And all of the apps that we're going to talk about, all the platforms, all the social media outlets in China, they make it super easy for purchasing. And that's something that we're going to talk about through the presentation today. So on scale 2, again, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of all of these apps. You might have heard of WeChat. You might have heard of Douyin, which is TikTok, maybe Weibo or Baidu. But just again on the right-hand side, you can see the scale. So WeChat has 990 million active users. Taobao, the sales channel, 820 million active users. Alipay, the payment system. So these figures are just huge. And that is one of the things that amazed me when I went to China, was just the sheer scale of the e-commerce. It's just something that from a European perspective, it just blows it out of the water. So let's go back a little bit to the birth of cross-border e-commerce. In 2008, the world was entering into an economic crash, and China was the main growth from China came from export. But China realized back in 2008 that as the world went into a recession, it couldn't export its way out to growth. So it needed to produce a domestic demand. It needed to grow domestic demand. And every 5 years, the Chinese government meet and they set out 5-year plan. And back in 2008, 2010, they determined that the economy had to grow by 7% annually. So what they did was that they introduced different rules to enable businesses from abroad to export into China and for Chinese businesses to import. But the beauty about what this new cross-border e-commerce was that it was taking out the complexities and it was allowing brands directly sell B2C. And that was the fundamental difference. It broke down a lot of the rules. It broke down a lot of the red tape. And this was the start of the huge growth of cross-border e-commerce. And as you saw from the earlier slide, the scale is that from 2012 onwards, this scale just went up and up and up until it's estimated this year that it's going to be reach over 50% of retail purchases is going to be done online. So China, as we said, is not only the largest e-commerce market in the world, but it's also the most exciting, unique, and innovative. And I kind of laugh sometimes when we look at Facebook and WhatsApp, and they're talking about launching this new digital currency that you'll be able to use on WhatsApp, and you'll be able to buy things on WhatsApp. And I just go, this has been in China for 6-7 years now. So with the WeChat Pay, Alipay, all integrated onto all of the websites, being able to use it freely among society. If you're buying some lemon at the side of the road, or some mango, or if you're up on a tourist destination miles away from anything, you can scan a QR code and pay for something. So it's really, really unique. And what they've managed to do in China is they've managed to marry online and offline. They've managed to make online purchases really fun, and they've managed to make offline purchases really unique in using technologies. And it wouldn't be unusual on a big shopping day, on a sort of a special day, that if you were going shopping in a department store, you could go in, you could put on virtual goggles, you could link it up to your account, you could virtually go and shop and get special offers in the physical store, you could pay for your goods virtually, and then when you got home, the goods would be delivered to you. And this is this mixing of an innovation of online and offline, and they do it just phenomenally good in China. And as a retailer, as I said, if you want to go and see what we will be doing in Europe in 5 years' time, well, you need to go to China now, because they are so far ahead of what we are seeing and what's on our horizon. And they are setting the global trend, the global trend for innovation in e-commerce. I suppose the other thing to remember too is the timing of this. Is that if you look back to 2008, it was the launch of the smartphone, and then you had the apps. You had a huge generation of younger Chinese finding out the new phones and the new apps, with a government policy to encourage brands to sell online and to sell B2C. So really the timing was a perfect storm, and it just really couldn't be better. But it really has grown, I think, probably to a state that they hadn't really anticipated back in 2012. So here is a quick video that I hope will work.
刷脸支付第一次在线下应用的商业试点。
So this is really a success story of a brand that's really, really done super well in China, KFC. And the technology we see here that's 3 years old. That was rolled out in 2018, 2019. And it's adapted and it's evolved even more so since then, and in really simple ways, in that when you check in at the airport, a picture is taken, and then when you go through customs, if you're lost or you can't find your way to your gate, because again the airports are quite large, you go up to a screen, and even as a foreigner, you go up and it'll take a picture of your face, and it'll know from your check-in where you should be going, and it'll direct you in English or Spanish or Chinese or whatever language to where your gate should be. So this innovation in technology is there, and they've adapted it and brought it into e-commerce and into retail. Now just move on. Okay, so again, you might not be aware in relation to the Chinese firewall. So pretty much most Western apps and social media is blocked. So if you're in China and you're in your hotel and you go out of your hotel and you're trying to find the nearest tourist destination or the subway, and you open up your phone and you look for Google Maps, it just won't work. So the Chinese have put up a firewall that protects the Chinese citizens, and also upholds the information that the Chinese government wants the citizens to see. So there is a lot of controls on foreign media, on foreign websites. And I think the way to be aware of it is that pretty much everything that you do and say online in China is being looked at, both from a business point of view and also from a personal point of view. And you just got to accept that, is that if you want to do business in China, you got to do it their way. And you have to be prepared that you have to be conscious of the sensitivities. And that's why the reason for the Chinese firewall. But because the Chinese firewall is there, it's real. The Chinese apps that have grown out of that have become super apps, and they've managed to incorporate a huge amount more than just one function. So it's not unusual to find a social media app with a huge amount of other add-ons built into the app, most notably of sharing, of purchase, of payment, potentially logistics and marketing. So all of these add-on functions are added into the most basic of apps, and they all become quite big and integrated. So again, depending on your exposure to China, you might not know that obviously Google is blocked, but also that they have a Chinese equivalent, which is Baidu. And within the domestic Chinese market, Baidu would account for about 80% of the searches. It is very much domestically focused. Its algorithms very much favor businesses and accounts which are set up and hosted on Chinese servers. And obviously the algorithms favor websites that are in simple Chinese. So Google would account for 90% of the US searches, 92% of the world searches, but Baidu on a global scale only represents 1.2% of all the global searches. So really it is a domestically orientated search engine, but it's also involved in everything else that you would imagine. So from mapping, from cloud, from encyclopedia, from electric cars to automated cars to health. It's an exact replica of Google, and it's Baidu, and it's the go-to search engine when you are in China. And again, going back to the monitoring, the surveillance, the control, is that if you need to have an internet content provider's license, even if you're having your own website or a business, the Chinese ministry will obviously administer the license. And very interesting, to get highly ranked up the Baidu search engine, you actually have to register with the government. There's two types of licenses. You can get an individual license or you can get a business license. But again, there's an element of control put in here. So if you're getting an individual one, you will actually have to give your own mobile phone, probably your passport. And also if you're doing a business license, this is something that I remember I was quite taken aback with. When we were setting up on Taobao back in 2014, as a director, I had to give all of my own personal information. So my passport, my house details, my mobile phone. And as a director of a company in Ireland, a limited company in Ireland, I was never prepared to give that information. But as I learned in China, is that if you want to get on to social media, if you want to set up and get into platforms, if you want to sell on the likes of JD or Taobao or any of these sites in China, as a company director, you will probably most likely have to give some of your personal information, be it your passport, or someone will within your organization. So just be conscious of that. It's just a way of the Chinese authorities keeping control. And if you want to do it and to sell and to get into China, you will, or someone within your organization will have to give this information. Again, so there are other search engines. It's not as if Baidu is the only one, but it does account for nearly 80%. Google you will get, but you will only get Google the furthest you go away from Beijing. So if you're down around Hong Kong, Macau, down around southern China, or maybe up near some of the borders, you will get it. But it is very much blocked in the vast majority of places. What you do find, you see Bing there as well. Microsoft in general doesn't seem to be as affected. Again, if you're using Microsoft and you're using Microsoft Cloud, and you're in China for business, it is much easier to access Microsoft Cloud-based services than Google. Google, it's tremendously difficult, but I've found from personal experience that Microsoft is much more obtainable. So in relation to Twitter and Weibo, so again, this is Weibo would be a Chinese equivalent of Twitter. It's very similar in some aspects in that the 240 characters for Twitter, 140 for Weibo. But I think the real difference is if you look at the screen here and you look at the content, to us, it looks cluttered. But in actual fact, that isn't a cluttered screen from a Chinese interaction. Within Chinese social media, within e-commerce, the amount of information, the amount of links, the amount of color is really something that is very, very different to what we're used to. But also within the difference between Twitter and Weibo is the sheer amount of social engagement and other options to share, to like, to buy, to market, to promote. It really just is, it's morphed from just being a Twitter account into an actual retail hub or a marketing platform. So an awful lot of companies, myself included, are using this as the way to really market, to promote, and because the restrictions in the amount of content that you can push out into the marketplace are limitless. With certain other social media platforms like WeChat, for instance, you are limited to the amount of content that you can send out to your followers. Whereas in Weibo, there's very, very little limits. So you can continually bombard, or if that's probably not the right word, but you can continually communicate and to engage with your followers and in general. So it's a really, really good platform to start off with in China. And I would encourage you to, if you haven't heard of it, to kind of look up with this and make it part of your strategy for China. I think it's one of the vital tools to use Weibo. And any of the content that you create for Weibo or any of the other channels can be used in all the other channels. So it's not just one content for one particular platform or social media outlet. You can use all of the video, all of the content, and utilize that across many different platforms and share that. So I think that's the beauty of the kind of integration of the Chinese social media network and the Chinese e-commerce, is that it is that so much integrated into each other. It would be very difficult to just look at Twitter and Weibo as one half of the same coin. Is that they are fundamentally different, and you will totally have to customize your Weibo account. There is just absolutely no way you'd be able to take your content from a Twitter and ask someone to replicate that into Weibo. It wouldn't work, and it would fail completely. But also what you have to be so careful of is staying within the communication rules. Again, you've probably all heard of the certain issues that H&M and Adidas and other brands are having now in relation to cotton supplies. Maybe 18 months, 2 years ago, Dolce & Gabbana got into awful trouble for an ad campaign. And the interesting thing about the kind of difference between the Dolce & Gabbana and the kind of cotton issue at the moment is the cotton issue is very kind of political at a government level, but from the Dolce & Gabbana issue, that was really the Chinese consumers. The Chinese consumers got very offended by the Dolce & Gabbana advertising, and it was really driven by social media and Chinese social media that caused all the problems. So it was, you know, you have to be very careful and very sensitive, not just to some kind of political issues, but also maybe offending the Chinese sensibilities. And there are differences, as I said, between West and China on these. So in relation, this is our own, my own Emerald Green Weibo account. And what, as you can see, we can post videos out on the left-hand side. We can do articles. We can do surveys. And this is, as I said, it's a great tool and should be part of your digital channel when you go into China. And we're working on a very interesting Weibo campaign at the moment. And what we're doing is that we're working with an Irish pharmaceutical chain who has absolutely no presence in China. They have no marketing, nothing in China. And what we've done is that we're beginning to post out on our Weibo links to this Western website, to this Irish website. There's nothing in Chinese on the Irish website. The only thing that we have done is that we had embedded a payment mechanism so that Chinese consumers, when they click on the link, they get to the product in the pharmacy, is that there's an ability to pay in Chinese currency. And this is, again, the first that we've worked on, and it's a really, really unique way of doing it. So what we're going to do is that we're going to post out in Chinese on our Weibo account, but it links, all of the links go directly back to the website in Ireland, and we will then look after all the logistics and send it to the Chinese consumer. So this is a drop shipping from the existing website and warehouse in Ireland. But the difference is that the Chinese consumer is going to be able to pay with Alipay, WePay, or UnionPay. And that's something that we'll talk about a little bit again later on, is that the Chinese consumer don't have a Visa or MasterCard. So even if you do spend an awful lot of work of putting simple Chinese and into your website, and you might have the most beautiful website and e-commerce, but if you don't accept Alipay, WePay, or UnionPay, the Chinese consumer most likely will not be able to do e-commerce. And the market is still very small, is that I think that only 27 million people are actually purchased off a Western website I think the figures were from 2019. So it is a very, very small market, but it is growing. But there's no way that you will be able to do any e-commerce unless you have the ability to accept Alipay, WePay, or UnionPay on your website. So another thing that's interesting in Weibo is that if this is your first move into China, most likely the Chinese consumer hasn't heard of you. So what you should use the Weibo as is a way of doing a little bit of pre-market analysis, is to maybe sign up account and start doing surveys and start posting out and start getting customer feedback. And this is a really, really good way of kind of a cost-effective way of dipping your toe into the Chinese market without having to go to all of the setup right from the beginning. So that really is the first module finished. Again, if there are any questions, we will go through them at the end. But Laura, if there is anything in particular that jumps out at you, if not, what we'll do is we'll jump into the second module, which is cross-border e-commerce and figures. I suppose if you're not online, is it possible to go into China? We'll have a discussion about that. How is COVID shifting the market? Again, the figure that we showed about the scale is showing that. And general trade versus cross-border e-commerce. We'll talk about all these in the next module. So we talked about this. So we can see that the shift has already happened. So back in 2018, the online market was just under 30%. It went to 34% in 19, 44% in COVID first year, and on up to 52%. So in answering one of the questions is, has COVID shifted the marketplace? I think, as Christoph mentioned earlier on at the very beginning, is that in his opinion, and absolutely in my opinion, that the online market is growing even bigger. It probably wouldn't have got to 50% in 2021. It might have been later on in 24, 25, 26, but certainly COVID has shifted the dial in China and really pushed ahead on e-commerce. And I think, as you can see from the figures, these are only estimates, but I still think it absolutely is possible to go into mainland China in general trade, go onto shelves, find a distributor and an agent. But again, I think the cost effectiveness, the ease, the less restrictions, I really do think, and I would advise you from my experience, would be is to really look at online as your first port of call, and maybe general trade as your second port of call. But I'm sure in the questions and answers we can discuss this in a little bit more detail. So again, just to look at last year and this year, last year bricks and mortar declined by 18.6, but again online grew by 27, nearly 28%. It's going to grow at 21% online this year, and again we're going to see bricks and mortar decline again. And I think this is a similar trend that we're seeing across Europe. You know, there is a struggle, and I'm in the retail game as well. I have 22 restaurants with both online and offline facilities in Ireland, and we are absolutely, we're completely shut at the moment. But even in 2019, we were seeing the growth of online, and during lockdown, online is the only thing that we're able to do. So I think this shift is happening in Europe, and the interesting figures from last year and this year to see, and maybe into 22, 23, to see where has the shift gone. Because if you look at across the world, the penetration of online, you can see here China is up at 52%, South Korea, look at it at 28%. This is where China was 2 years ago. The UK within Europe, again, going back to 2020, I think that figure in the UK was around 21%. So they were the best in Europe in 2020. Obviously a huge jump in 21 in COVID. And right the way down the mark, you can see Denmark, Norway, but even the US, only 15% of the purchases, of retail purchases, are done online. So China is nearly 4 times that, or 3.5 times that. And the EU average is 11.2. So what we are used to, as I said, is so small compared to the Chinese market. And going back to the very start slide of what makes China different is the scale and the innovation. And here it just shows you what we are used to in Europe is so different to the Chinese market. And online is definitely where it's at in the Chinese market. So I think there are obvious barriers to entry when you're talking about China. Obviously, there's the language issue. There's an element of trust, and like this is like any business that you're going, or any country that you're going into. You as the manufacturer or the brand have to decide: are we going to sell online? Are we going to sell offline? Are we going to try to do both? Are we going to try to find a distributor or an agent? Are we going to try to do it ourselves? Are we going to do B2C? Will we do everything drop ship from our own logistics in Hungary? Are we going to go to a free trade zone? Then there's all the customs issues. There's obviously the different regulations. And really crucially, there's a currency. Again, in Hungary, if you're deciding that you want to sell within the European Union, it's so simple. If you decide that you want to do trade in Russia, it's relatively simple on the currency exchange. I know there's certain difficulties, but within China, there are real difficulties for companies getting money in and out. So these are kind of the things that you would be the obvious barrier to entries when you were sitting down and deciding if you wanted to go into China or not. But there's some not so obvious barriers to entry. Is that, as we talked, you have to understand the unique online shopping ecosystem. So it's not a case of just sort of saying, well, I have an e-commerce site, I'm going to put it into simple Chinese, and the Chinese consumer are going to come and shop with me. As we talked about, is that if you don't have Chinese payment on it, you certainly won't be able to get a transaction. And if you don't do some element of marketing in China, you certainly won't get Chinese consumers to find you. You also have to understand the difference between platforms and websites. And this is something that we're going to go into in module 3. But as I've said, is that Chinese consumers just don't buy off websites. Even if large brands like Gucci and North Face or any of the large cosmetic brands, they may have Chinese websites, but the e-commerce is all done off the large platforms. And the reason being is that, one, Chinese consumers just really don't go to individual websites. They will do a huge amount of research on a product, but they will do it on one of the major platforms. So you would have Alibaba, you'd have Taobao, Tmall, JD.com, NetEase. There's a huge amount of platforms. And again, we'll go through this in a bit more detail, but the integration within these platforms is that there is so much information that they make it super easy for the consumer to buy. So obviously too, is that we talked about, is that if you don't have Chinese payments, Alipay, WePay, you won't be able to do e-commerce, because only 8% of the Chinese consumer have credit cards, and if they do, it's most likely it's going to be a UnionPay credit card. You obviously have the Chinese firewall. So we're doing this test with McCabe's Pharmacy, and one of the first things that we had to do is that we had to see, was there any restriction, because the McCabe's Pharmacy in Ireland was based on an Irish server. We had to first of all check to see, could a Chinese person actually get access to this website from China because of the Chinese firewall? And if they could, what was the speed? So we've done all the tests from about 10 different Chinese cities, and there's easy access to this particular website in Ireland. But we are at, we do take a chance at any time that could be blocked. So our whole strategy, the brand's whole strategy of doing direct selling into China from its own warehouse could be stopped at any time. We have no idea, but it's worth trying and doing a test on that to start off. The other importance, again, we're going to talk later on during the models, is social influencing and the effect it has on sales. And I'll go back to a very early example of back in 2015, when we were moving from selling into mainland, from Hong Kong into mainland China. And we got an account on Taobao, which is a very large online shopping channel with probably, back then, I think it had over 100 million individual shops on the Taobao platform. And one of the things that we learned very quickly was the comments and the customer service. And even though we were based in Ireland and there was a 7 to 8 hour time difference with mainland China, the Chinese consumer wanted to engage with us before they bought, as they bought, and after they bought. So we had to have a Chinese person in China in real time asking questions for our customer. And this is something, it's like going on to, I give the analogy of, it's like going on to a website like Amazon and having a personal shopper that you can ask questions about before you buy a product. And I'm not sure about you, but I know when I go on to to Amazon or eBay, is that I find the product, I look at the price. In relation to Ireland, it's whether it's coming from UK, whether it's a sterling or a euro price, and you just buy. There's no interaction between the customer and customer service. And that is totally different on the Chinese platforms. They really want to engage. They do a huge amount of research on the product. They'll ask you questions. They'll expect a response. And then once they've got the product, they'll take pictures of the product. They will post it up online and they'll give you a review. And if you don't answer the review or comment on the review or send a little smiley face back, this will affect your ranking and their satisfaction rating. And that'll follow on to the next customers. And if you drop down from a 5 to a 4.5 to a 4, the next customers will see and they'll ask you questions on that. So social influencing and the effect on sales and customer service is something that you really, really need to take very seriously in China. And I know everyone talks about customer service being very important, and it is, but in China, it's taken to another degree. The other not so difficult, not so obvious barrier to entry is the CIQ, the Customs Import and Quality Requirements, the customs really. And they are, they're not difficult to get around, but you do have to be aware of it. And there are different rules, which we're going to go to in the next slide. There are different rules and regulation for customs import and quarantine for going into general trade and going into online. And this, these requirements might determine which route you go, whether you go online or offline. But the very, very first thing which I would recommend you to do, and this is where the EU SME Centre are absolutely brilliant at, is the whitelist. This is a booklet of all products that are able to be sold cross-border e-commerce. There are some restrictions, and so you should get this list. It's a digital list. It's in Chinese and it's English, and Laura will probably be able to contact the team in the Beijing office. We have used this extensively, and it's a really, really great resource, and it's your first resource that you should look for. Again, there was a Finnish company that we were working with that was doing chewing gum that had stem oil in it. And stem oil was one product that wasn't allowed to be sold cross-border e-commerce. But because of, there's other subheadings with chewing gum and sweets and all the rest, we were able to find a code that we were able to register the product on. That was able to get the product in. But it's just something that you really, really should, this should be your first protocol, is the whitelist. And this is where the EU SME Centre, one of the key things that's brilliant about the EU SME Centre. And again, this is unscripted too, and hasn't been rehearsed with Laura, but we've been working with the EU SME Centre when we were trading, when we were trying to get into to China, before I even started doing consultancy. We were buying, selling, negotiating, trading, and the EU SME Centre was a phenomenal resource and helped us get set up and allowed us to get set up in China. And we probably wouldn't have been able to do it without their help. So I would encourage all of you to reach out to the EU SME Centre. So before cross-border e-commerce, it was really tricky trying to get a product into China. You had to have an agent. You could not do it. That agent was your, I suppose, legal representative within China. So you as a brand were restricted. You had to find an agent. You had to find a good agent. And all the cards were kind of held with the agent. You had to do CIQ, general trade. Depending on the product, it could have taken between 6 and 18 months. It was expensive. It could cost up to 5,000 RMB, which is just under kind of 1,000 euros. It could be about 800 euros per SKU to go through the test. In some products, there had to be testing done. Not so anymore, but this was the case. A big fundamental was the labeling. So anything going into China, going onto a shelf, had to have Chinese labeling. And that's become more and more detailed since 2012. And also too, which is quite interesting too, and I know when I was working with some brands, the general trade, the amount of information about the product, not just percentage of ingredients, but there was quite detailed information regarding the chemical makeup of products. And I know some brands that we looked at just said, we're not going to give this level of information, and decided not to go into general trade. So remember, this is all pre-cross-border e-commerce. Now, again, if you are going to go into general trade at the moment, you still have to fill out general trade term CIQ, but there is an alternative now, but you still do have to go through a CIQ for general trade. But as I said, you have an alternative. You had to have the Chinese distributor, and all of the data, all your sales information, all of your marketing information was kind of held with this distributor. And we came across this Australian brand that and Australia, New Zealand, Japan and Korea are so far ahead of Europe on integration and sales into China. They maybe their closeness to the market, but they really have focused and really have got in there kind of ahead of European brands. But this Australian business back in 2010, 12, 13 had set up a tremendous business, had a great agent, was doing great business, had done its forecast for the next 2 years of 15, 20% growth. And then suddenly all of its sales were stopped. They were getting no order from its distributor. They flew over to Shanghai, they met the distributor, and the distributor had simply just found another product at a cheaper price. And the Australian company was literally just cut out. So no more orders. So they said, okay, well, that's fine. We're disappointed, but can we have the data for who our sales clients are? Nope. No data was provided. So it is something just to be aware of it. There are tremendously good distribution agents that we've worked at, but again, you have to find the right one. So just be careful if you are going into the general trade. Remember that once you give the information over to your agent or your distributor, you really don't have control of it anymore. So it's just something to be conscious of. And also too is that there are higher taxes and duties when you're going into doing it through general trade. So it's just something to be aware about. So the Chinese government, we're back to 2008, 2010. They're trying to grow domestic consumption. The world's in an economic slump. China's not going to be able to export their way out of it. They've got to grow the domestic demand. What do? They came up with a streamlined process for cross-border e-commerce. And what this meant is that they created the CIQ, which was so much more simpler. It was really, really fast. We're talking 3, 5, 7 days fast. It was really inexpensive, 25, 50, 75 euros, depending on the product. It was all done, there was no testing. Really importantly, there was no requirements for any packaging changes. So if you can imagine, you were selling your products to the Chinese as if the Chinese was your domestic market. And it was B2C. So it was a really, really brilliant, simple way to get products into the Chinese hands and to grow this domestic consumption. It was really, really simple to do the CIQ process. It's all done online. It does have to be done in Chinese, but it's quite a simple Excel spreadsheet just to fill in and submit. As I said, you could sell direct to the consumers. So you held, as the manufacturer, as the brand, you controlled all the content. You controlled all of the communication. You knew who your customers were. So this is really, really important. You did not also have to set up a legal entity. So while I do have a Chinese company, I don't have to have a Chinese company. I can do all of our operations from Dublin, and which we do. We have a small office in Shanghai, but basically the main focus of the business is all driven from Dublin. So that's something that cross-border really you should look at very as the first thing for getting into China. Yes, general trade is for some brands is the way to go, but I really think the size, if depending on the size of your business, you really should look first at cross-border e-commerce rather than general trade. But there's no reason why you can't do both. And also I'm working with the brand that has decided to do online and offline strategy differently. So they've found an agent to do their online, even though they don't have to do it. And they found an agent to do their general distribution, 2 different agents. So again, that they're mixing and matching so that they can keep some control of what's happening. And also the beauty of the cross-border e-commerce is that there was lower taxes. It's very, very simple. Depending on the product, it could be kind of 11.8%, it could be 7%, but it was much cheaper to do. So they're the real core differences between general trade and cross-border e-commerce. So another example is the speed to getting your product into China. So again, you can decide if you're going to do fulfillment so do B2C, do all your marketing in China, but like what we're doing with the Irish company is have your fulfillment in Hungary. That's one way to dip your toe into the market. The other way then, like which we did in 2016, is moved all our operations into the free trade zone in Shanghai. And there's multiple free trade zones now. They're opening up all the time, all over China. So it's not just on the East Coast. They're moving more inland and down south as well into southern parts of China. But the beauty of doing cross-border e-commerce is you can either do it from your warehouse in Hungary, or you can move it to mainland China, to a free trade zone. Having it in the free trade zone means that you can get the product obviously quicker to the consumer, which is one point, but also by having you can have smaller quantities. You don't have to talk 20-foot or 40-foot containers. We were selling out 1, 2, 3 pallets and just holding them in the warehouse for one particular brand. So again, you don't have to tie up huge amounts of capital and have it sitting on the ocean for 6 weeks and passing through customs. In 2016, when we launched our WeChat store, we ran out of some products within the first 2 weeks. And it was a Saturday morning. And I remember picking up the phone to the manufacturer and saying, I need another pallet. And by Monday, we had that pallet picked up. It was on a plane Monday night, in China on Thursday, through customs Friday, back on sale on Saturday. So it took us 1 week to get our product back on sale after we launched the store. So that's the kind of beauty of cross-border e-commerce and utilizing air freight and having a free trade zone that you can just hold minimal amount of stock in. As I said, it could be down to the pallets. Again, because of the sheer plethora and the huge amount of choice, is that there are so many different platforms to choose on. You might decide at a brand that you want to go to a specialist platform, or you might want to go to a huge behemoth like Tmall. So again, you can pick and choose. As you're selling B2C, again, you, the brand, you, the manufacturer, are in control. You also control all the content. And this is very interesting too, is that you might decide to reposition your brand going into China. So for instance, Pizza Hut is a classic example. So Pizza Hut would be kind of an entry-level kind of fast food pizza. But in China, they decided to go to the middle upmarket segment, somewhere where you would bring your wife out for dinner with, or as a real treat. So they repositioned themselves when they went into China. And that again, because if you're doing cross-border e-commerce, you're in control of all the content. You can decide how you want to pitch your product in China. So that's just an interesting way, and it's a flexible way, and it's something to think about when you look at your journey into China. And obviously, it's cost effective, and you can set the budget. But again, at a recent presentation I was at, this Chinese marketing girl gave this really, really interesting slide, and it was just so simple and so true. Is that if you're looking at China versus going into exporting into Middle East from Hungary, or looking at maybe going into Russia from Hungary, is that if you're looking at China, you look at double the effort and triple the cost. You might have the perception that it is a cheap market to get into. It is a phenomenally expensive market to get into. The rewards are great if you get it right, but it is by no means a cheap market to get into. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes money, and you just have to be aware of that. So that is the coffee break.